Sign this. I am done with you.
Please, don't do this. Not now.
The contractions were only minutes apart when the door slammed open. Clara Whitmore clutched the railing of the hospital bed, sweat on her forehead, breath breaking in pain. Nurses rushed around her. Then she saw him. Ethan Cole. Not alone. Vanessa Hart stood beside him, dressed like this was a red carpet event, not a maternity ward. Ethan didn't look at Clara's face. He held out papers. Sign this. Divorce papers. Clara tried to sit up. The pain shot through her stomach. She slid off the bed, trembling, one hand holding her belly as she knelt on the cold hospital floor. Please? Ethan, don't do this, not now. Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed. Ethan's face twisted in disgust. I endured you for years. You and your pathetic, poor life disgusted me. I can't wait to be free of you. A nurse tried to intervene. Ethan snapped, this is between husband and wife. Clara's tears fell on the papers. She didn't sign. She just whispered, broken, I loved you. Ethan leaned closer. You were a mistake I tolerated. He turned and walked out with Vanessa, leaving his wife in labor. Leaving the woman who secretly built everything he owned. Without knowing it. Without knowing who Clara Whitmore really was. And as Clara screamed in pain and heartbreak, she whispered to herself. You never loved me, only the version of me you thought was nothing. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The monitor beeped faster. Sweat soaked Clara Whitmore's hairline as her fingers crushed the hospital sheets and another contraction tore through her body with ruthless force. She was in labor. Alone. Breathing through pain that made her vision blur and her voice shake. Then the door opened. Not with a nurse. Not with a doctor. But with her husband, Ethan Cole. And beside him, smiling as if she had arrived for entertainment, stood Vanessa Hart. Ethan did not rush to Clara's side. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not look at the blood, the fear, or the agony written across her face. He walked calmly to the foot of her bed holding a stack of papers in his hand and said, sign this, Clara. She tried to push herself up, wincing as pain shot through her spine. Please, not now, the baby. Vanessa laughed loudly, pulling out her phone as if this moment was something worth recording. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Ethan dropped the divorce papers onto Clara's lap and said with cold disgust, I've endured you for 3 years. Looking at you makes me sick. I only stayed because I needed you. Another contraction hit and Clara slid from the bed, her knees crashing onto the cold hospital floor as tears streamed down her face. She grabbed Ethan's trousers with trembling hands and begged, don't leave me, please. I love you. Vanessa kept laughing while filming her humiliation. And Ethan looked down at the woman carrying his child and said the words that would later destroy his entire life. You are nothing without me. Remember that. What Ethan did not know was that every car he drove, every business he owned, every house in his name, every dollar in his account had been built quietly by Clara Whitmore. The woman kneeling on the hospital floor was not helpless. She was the only daughter of billionaire investor Richard Whitmore. And by the time baby Noah Cole entered this world, Ethan Cole would be in handcuffs, and Vanessa Hart would be begging for mercy. As Clara Whitmore lay in the hospital bed after giving birth to Noah Cole, exhaustion pulling at her body while silence filled the room, memories she had kept buried for years began to surface with painful clarity. Long before the humiliation on that hospital floor, long before Ethan Cole and the life he believed he had built, Clara had lived in a world few people ever saw. She was the only daughter of Richard Whitmore, a reclusive billionaire investor whose influence stretched across industries while his name remained absent from public attention. From childhood, Clara was taught a lesson her father repeated often: money changes the way people look at you, speak to you, and claim to love you. When she grew older, she made a decision that would shape her entire future. She left the comfort of her father's estate and chose to live simply, dressing modestly, working ordinary jobs, and hiding her true background because she wanted to experience a life where affection was not influenced by wealth. That was when she met Ethan Cole. He was broke, driven, and filled with restless ambition, talking endlessly about success he had not yet achieved but deeply believed he would. Clara admired his hunger and the way he spoke about building something meaningful from nothing. Ethan fell in love with a woman he believed understood struggle, and Clara fell in love with a man she believed would value her heart over status. When Ethan wanted to start his first business but lacked funding, Clara quietly contacted legal representatives tied to Richard Whitmore and arranged for anonymous investors to appear through shell companies that funded Ethan without revealing her involvement. When bills overwhelmed him, unexplained financial relief always arrived at the right time. When he dreamed of owning a house he could not afford, the payment was completed through layered transactions that made it look like a fortunate deal from a third party. When debts threatened to collapse everything, they disappeared without explanation. Step by step, Clara built the foundation of Ethan's success in complete silence, protecting his pride and allowing him to believe he was achieving it all on his own. He never knew that every milestone he celebrated had been carefully supported by the woman beside him. Clara hid the truth because she wanted Ethan to love her for who she was, not for the fortune she came from, and in doing so she unknowingly built the very life he would later claim she contributed nothing to. While Clara Whitmore recovered with Noah Cole resting beside her, Richard Whitmore began moving with the kind of quiet precision that came from a lifetime of influence exercised without spectacle. He did not call Ethan Cole. He did not argue, threaten, or announce his intentions. He simply made a series of calm phone calls that set powerful systems into motion. Within hours, financial institutions placed immediate holds on every major account tied to Ethan's name. Transactions were flagged, access was restricted, and balances he believed were secure became temporarily unreachable under formal review. By the next morning, legal teams initiated a fraud investigation built on documentation that had been prepared long before Ethan realized any of this existed. Tax authorities received detailed reports requesting urgent audits into irregular ownership patterns connected to his businesses. Archived filings were pulled and examined, revealing that the original investments funding Ethan's company traced back through layered entities to trust structures created in Clara Whitmore's name years earlier. On paper, the company Ethan proudly claimed as his own had never legally belonged to him. Property records confirmed that the house he showed off to friends was funded through channels he could not explain, and it was marked for seizure pending investigation. His bank accounts were lawfully drained to zero as part of the review process, leaving him staring at empty balances where his confidence once lived. Before we further deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Then the lawsuit arrived, formally filed on behalf of Clara Whitmore, citing emotional abuse, fraud, and asset misrepresentation supported by evidence collected quietly over time. At first, Ethan laughed it off in front of Vanessa Hart, convincing himself this was a misunderstanding he could resolve with a few calls. But the laughter stopped when police vehicles pulled into the driveway. Officers stepped out calmly as neighbors watched from windows and phones began recording. Vanessa stood frozen near the door as they placed handcuffs around Ethan's wrists and read the charges aloud in a voice that carried across the silent street. That was the moment Ethan realized this was not coincidence. This was deliberate, and it was already far beyond his control. Vanessa Hart believed that walking into that hospital room beside Ethan Cole marked the beginning of a better life, one where she had successfully removed Clara Whitmore from the picture and stepped into a future filled with comfort and status. For a short time after Ethan's arrest, she convinced herself that this was temporary, that powerful men always found ways to recover, and that she would still benefit once the situation settled. But the outside world was already shifting in a way she could not control. The video she recorded in the hospital, the one where she laughed while Clara begged on the floor in labor, was obtained through legal channels and included as evidence in the case. Once it became public, her face spread rapidly across social media, shared by strangers expressing outrage at what they were seeing. People who had never met Vanessa now knew her name, her voice, and the cruelty she displayed in one of the most vulnerable moments of another person's life. Her employer called her into a meeting the following morning, and by the end of that conversation, she no longer had a job. Friends stopped answering her calls. Messages went unread. Invitations disappeared. Then a legal notice arrived at her door informing her that she was being sued by Clara Whitmore for harassment and defamation tied directly to that hospital incident. Fear replaced confidence as bills began stacking up without income to support her. She tried repeatedly to contact Ethan in jail, leaving messages and writing letters, asking for reassurance, but Ethan could not help her from behind bars, and each response he managed to send grew shorter and more desperate. The reality she had refused to accept finally settled in when she realized she was facing the consequences alone. The man she believed she had secured was powerless, and the life she imagined had collapsed before it ever began, leaving Vanessa heartbroken, isolated, and publicly shamed by the attention she once enjoyed. Weeks passed, and the public noise surrounding the case softened into a distant murmur while Clara Whitmore focused on caring for Noah Cole in the quiet space arranged by Richard Whitmore. One evening, her phone rang with a number she did not recognize, yet something in her chest tightened before she answered. The voice on the other end was Ethan Cole's, unsteady and stripped of the confidence he once carried, and he was crying before he could form a full sentence. Clara said nothing at first, listening to his breathing and the faint echoes of the facility around him, allowing the silence to stretch long enough for the weight of everything to be felt. When he finally spoke, his words stumbled over each other as if he had rehearsed them and still could not say them correctly. Why did you pretend to be poor? The question hung there, filled with confusion and regret. Clara closed her eyes briefly, then answered with a calm that came from acceptance rather than anger. I wanted you to love me. Only me. On the other end, Ethan's sobbing grew louder as he tried to push more words through his tears. I did. I swear. Clara listened without interrupting, then replied with gentle clarity. No. You loved what you thought I needed from you. The line fell silent after that. Clara did not wait for another word. She ended the call, set the phone down beside her, and returned her attention to Noah Cole, knowing that the truth had finally been spoken and nothing else needed to be said. The courtroom carried a heavy stillness as Clara Whitmore took her seat beside her legal team, with Richard Whitmore seated quietly behind her, observing without expression while the proceedings began. Across the room, Ethan Cole looked diminished, his confidence replaced by a tense silence as folders of documents were arranged before the court. One by one, records were presented with careful explanation, and financial experts traced signatures through years of filings until the origin became undeniable. Each document led back to trust structures created in Clara Whitmore's name, revealing that the companies Ethan proudly claimed as his own were legally tied to her from the very beginning. Transaction histories appeared on screens, mapping the flow of funds from accounts Ethan had never known existed into the foundations of his success. Property records confirmed that the house he once boasted about had always belonged to Clara's holdings. Then came the evidence of emotional abuse, messages, testimonies, and timelines that built a clear picture of how the marriage deteriorated, ending in the hospital incident. When the video from that hospital room was played, the silence deepened as the image of Clara kneeling on the floor in labor while being mocked filled the screen. Ethan's voice declaring she was nothing echoed through the courtroom with painful clarity. When the clip ended, the judge looked directly at Ethan before speaking words that settled heavily in the room. You humiliated the woman who built your life. The sentence that followed was firm and final. Prison. Months later, the noise surrounding the case had faded into memory, replaced by a quiet routine centered entirely around Clara Whitmore and Noah Cole. The car carrying them passed through the tall gates of Richard Whitmore's estate and followed the long private road Clara had known since childhood, the trees arching overhead like a familiar welcome she once walked away from. She stepped out holding Noah close, feeling a calm she had not known in years settle gently over her. There was no disguise now, no modest clothing chosen to hide who she was, no effort to appear smaller than her reality. Staff members greeted her respectfully, but there was no spectacle, only a peaceful acknowledgement that she had returned home. The house stood exactly as she remembered, grand yet quiet, filled with memories of a life she once left in search of something she believed mattered more. Clara walked slowly through the doors, her footsteps echoing softly across wide floors as sunlight streamed through tall windows. There was no pain in her expression, no trace of the humiliation that once defined her final moments in that hospital room, only relief and quiet strength. She carried Noah to a window overlooking the gardens and held him close against her chest, feeling his small heartbeat steady against her own. In a soft voice meant only for him, Clara whispered, "You will never beg someone to love you." Time moved forward gently for Clara Whitmore, measured by the quiet sounds of Noah Cole breathing and the calm rhythm of days that no longer carried fear or disappointment. One afternoon, as she sat near the window holding Noah and watching light spill across the gardens of Richard Whitmore's estate, her phone began to ring on the table beside her. Clara glanced at the screen and immediately recognized the number. For a brief moment, her eyes rested there without anger or sadness, only a calm understanding that some chapters no longer needed reopening. The phone continued to ring, the sound soft in the large room, but Clara did not reach for it. Instead, she adjusted the blanket around Noah and allowed a peaceful smile to settle on her face. The call stopped. Silence returned. She leaned her head gently toward her child and closed her eyes, breathing in a moment that finally felt complete. The day Ethan Cole told her she was nothing was the day he lost everything. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories.